Information-fueled.
Opinion-driven.
This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
5:06 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 89.7 WTN, and we do obviously have a lot to talk about this morning. By the way, your weather, oh boy, it is going to be hot today. Hot this week. Today, a high of about 95. Possibility of some thunderstorms, going to feel like 100 degrees. Tuesday and Wednesday, high of 96. So we'll keep you updated on the weather as the morning does continue to unfold. So obviously we all know what happened over the weekend. President Trump, of course, making the announcement on Saturday night.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill.
You know, I knew that whole thing was a head fake. I knew when President Trump, I think it was on Friday, when he came out and he said, maybe it was Thursday heading into Friday, whatever. But last week when he said, no, I'm going to make a decision within 2 weeks. And insiders within the White House say that the president knew that he was going to strike within the next day or two. So, you know, I remember even talking about it on WTN. I said, is he head faking? And a lot of you agreed with me that yes, the president was head faking. There are people, and we're going to get into this, there are people who are a lot smarter than me, certainly militarily, who are saying that the execution of the strike on these 3 Iranian nuclear sites is one for the ages. I mean, the secrecy, the planning, the head fake, the decoy, everything. Just an amazing, amazing execution of a military strike. And listen, Donald Trump did try to negotiate with them. Donald Trump tried to warn them. He tried to get Iran to come to the table. Now, that was part of the message on Sunday morning from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. And he and Donald Trump both have been very consistent.
Just like Soleimani found out in the first term, Iran found out when POTUS says 60 days that he seeks peace and negotiation, he means 60 days of peace and negotiation. Otherwise, that nuclear program will not exist. He meant it.
Yeah, one way or another. I mean, basically, Donald Trump said we could do this the easy way or we could do this the hard way. You know that the president, and this came out over the weekend, Trump actually offered to fly all the way to Turkey himself. Trump offered to fly to Turkey for face-to-face talks with the Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. That was a week ago, and Donald Trump was snubbed. And I think that they understand now they probably shouldn't have snubbed the president because he meant business. He did, and they found out exactly how much over the weekend. So now Iran is out there calling Donald Trump a lawless bully who ignored diplomacy. Can I ask a question? And by the way, Iran is out there warning Donald Trump and America, you started this, we'll finish it. And so we'll see what happens. The terror level has been raised, of course, and that is part of the news cycle this morning. We do have, of course, Israel also on high alert, as obviously they have been for a long time. But Iran, they say that they're going to continue to enrich uranium. We'll have to see how obliterated their nuclear program is, because originally, as you know, the president came out and he said, we have obliterated their nuclear program. We have literally, the president said on True Social, we have literally taken the bomb out of their hands. We'll have to see who's right. I was watching over the weekend where they said, okay, so how long until we know just how obliterated their nuclear program is? I mean, it's certainly been set back, but obliterated is anybody's guess. We'll have to wait and see what Israel, because that's how we'll figure it out, is through Israel and their intelligence, and of course our intelligence as well. But again, Iran says they're going to continue to do what they do. One of the big questions is, how is Iran going to retaliate? The world is holding its breath. The National Terrorism Advisory System has raised the terror threat, and Iran's foreign minister is saying that they have to respond. So we wait. Remember, though, that Iran, and I don't need to tell you this, I know that you folks know this, we have sleeper cells in our country. There's a lot of things that Iran could do, not only to Israel, but also to our interests in the region, including the military bases. Now, remember what Donald Trump said, that he wants this to be the last time that he has to do this. Pete Hegseth had a presser. Again, this was on Sunday morning. And part of what he says is that, yeah, this needs to be done. Really, and I see where the left just lost their ever-loving minds. But I can see when the Trump administration says, this really actually is a de-escalation. It's not an escalation. It's a de-escalation. The left, of course, losing their ever-loving minds over that, but I don't really care.
As President Trump has stated, the United States does not seek war. But let me be clear. We will act swiftly and decisively when our people, our partners, or our interests are threatened. Iran should listen to the President of the United States and know that he means it, every word.
One of the big questions is, oh my gosh, is the United States declaring war on Iran? No, we're not declaring war on Iran. We were declaring war and have declared war on their nuclear aspirations. And so for the president, he is declaring this as a victory. I think even MSNBC, and I've got some great audio, even MSNBC is like, this was one heck of a military strike. Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane was there with Pete Hegseth over the weekend on Sunday.
Last night on the President's orders, U.S. Central Command, under the command of General Eric Kurilla, executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a deliberate and precise strike against 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. This was a complex and high-risk mission carried out with exceptional skill and discipline by our joint force.
Yeah, coming up, I'm going to play the audio of this guy, Dan Kane, and he is describing the incredible planning of this attack. But you had, of course, as you know, the 3 targeted nuclear facilities. They used apparently 14 bunker buster bombs, 24 Tomahawk missiles, over 125 military aircraft. They took off out of Missouri. Okay, Missouri. They flew across the United States over 2,500 miles over the Atlantic Ocean and the Mediterranean so that they could strike these nuclear facilities in Iran. How is it they weren't discovered? That is so shocking to me. They weren't discovered, and the Iranians, they didn't have any type of defense mechanisms in place, or we obliterated those as well, so that we could I'm not going to say easily, but it was like a very easy shot where we were able to get into those bunkers with our bombs and our bunker busters and everything else, because they didn't fire off any kind of defense missiles at all, which is kind of weird. So we were able to go and fly across the continental United States, across the Atlantic Ocean, across the Mediterranean, and into Iran, literally undetected. How do you do that with over 125 military aircraft? And yes, there were a lot of head fakes. Wait till you hear how the Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane describes this attack. It is all straight ahead. By the way, if you would, please watch us on YouTube. You can watch us anywhere. You can watch us on X, Facebook, YouTube, 997WTN.com. If you want to see us in action here doing the radio show, that is where you can. Watch us on YouTube, and you can take the daily poll. Today's poll, KGB, how did we eventually word the poll for today?
Yeah. Do you agree with President Trump's decision to take out 3 Iranian nuclear sites? Yes,
and
86% say yes.
86% say yes. Okay, listen, this was a surgical strike. Now the question is, what happens next? Because if Iran ultimately does something, well, then we may have to respond. It kind of depends on what they do. We'll talk about that straight ahead. It is 5:16. Time to check the roads on WTN. Thank you very much. By the way, we do have Congressman Scott Desjardins. He'll be joining us at 6:38 to give us his official reaction from a congressional standpoint to what we ultimately had to do over the weekend. By the way, as far as your weather goes, a high of today of 95, scattered thunderstorms. Going to feel like 100 degrees Tuesday and Wednesday. It is going to be 96 degrees for a high. Very hot week. Appreciate you listening to Nashville's Morning News on WTN. So talking about the Joint Chiefs Chairman Dan Kane, and he was there with Pete Hegseth on Sunday morning, and he was talking about how incredibly complicated yet precise and concise this attack was in Iran. He says, yes, there was a lot of head fakes.
As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy. Throughout the 18-hour flight into the target area, the aircraft completed multiple in-flight refuelings. Once over land, the B-2s linked up with escort and support aircraft in a complex, tightly timed maneuver requiring exact synchronization across multiple platforms in a narrow piece of airspace, all done with minimal communications.
Yeah, so you've got all these planes. They fly over the United States, over the Atlantic Ocean, over the Mediterranean. Meantime, you had that other group of planes that went to the west. And so, yeah, it was like a decoy. And then right as our planes entered Iranian airspace, apparently one of our submarines launched more than 24 missiles. I guess they were Tomahawk cruise missiles. And they took out, this again was a submarine, launched a couple of dozen Tomahawk cruise missiles against targets at the site of one of these nuclear facilities. And so as the bombers approached the targets, the U.S. deployed these missiles and took out some of their air defense systems. So we were able to just go in and take these facilities out. Fighter jets were able to clear the airspace ahead of them, checking for enemy aircraft and surface-to-air missiles. And at the point where our stealth bombers got in there and our bunker buster bombers got in there, all of that surface-to-air missile technology had been destroyed. And so Dan Kane, again, this is the guy in charge of all of this, the Joint Chiefs Chairman. He says after that, it was not easy, but it was pretty much a clear target all the way in.
As the Operation Midnight Hammer strike package entered Iranian airspace, the U.S. employed several deception tactics, including decoys, as the fourth and fifth generation aircraft pushed out in front of the strike package at high altitude and high speed, sweeping in front of the package for enemy fighters and surface-to-air missile threats.
So you've got the bombers, you've got the support planes flying 18 hours, fueling in midair, limited communications, submarines clearing out the surface-to-air missiles. It sounds like things were just incredibly tight, incredibly precise. And coming up, I've got some great audio from MSNBC. Even they, believe it or not, were complimentary of how precise this was. And then, of course, with all of that cleared down below, the bombs started dropping.
At approximately 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 2:10 a.m. Iran time, the lead B-2 dropped two GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator weapons on the first of several aim points at Fordo. As the president stated last night, the remaining bombers then hit their targets as well, with a total of 14 MOPs dropped against two nuclear target areas. All three Iranian nuclear infrastructure targets were struck between 6:40 p.m. and 7:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, that's about 2:10 in the morning local time in Iran, with the Tomahawk missiles being the last to strike at Esfahan to ensure we retain the element of surprise throughout the operation.
Yep, and apparently Iran's fighter jets simply didn't fly. We got in, we got out. Perfect mission, amazing.
This was the largest B-2 operational strike in U.S. history and the second longest B-2 mission ever flown, exceeded only by those in the days following 9/11.
So now we have, of course, all of these foreign leaders that are condemning the attack, right? No big shock here. Chinese President Xi Jinping said that Donald Trump violated international peace. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer urging for a de-escalation of tension. So there's a lot going on. Iran, of course, is now complaining that this whole thing was unlawful. And they are again warning Donald Trump, warning Americans across the world. You started this. We will finish it. And certainly you do have cities like New York and Washington, D.C. that are on high alert. It is 5:22 on Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7. And Jay Harper is in for Joan Jones today. Jay, what's going on?
Yeah, Dan, Iran claiming to be planning its response to those U.S. airstrikes. And how worried should we be about potential responses from Iran here on the mainland? And an earthquake in southern Middle Tennessee? Well, apparently so. We'll have those stories coming up at 5:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.